It's important for us to bring our scholarship to the world in solving the most pressing problems. But the truth is, we need to study these complex issues in a complex way, which really requires multidisciplinary study. Conferences like this become incredibly important to answering the problems that are most facing our society today.
The issue of discrimination is not one problem, it's not one determinant. And so it was critical in this conference, like the one of last year, to hear really different perspectives. That's the great part of this conference, which is interdisciplinary by its very nature.
Some work focused on the labor markets, personal finance, the foster care system, criminal justice. It's useful to get a lot of people studying different questions together to make sure that within the economics community we're getting feedback and incorporating perspectives outside the field.
Rustandy was a very natural partner for this conference. Rustandy thinks a lot about social responsibility of business. A big part of the social responsibility is kind of being serious about inclusion and diversity and doing that well. A big goal of this conference is to think about kind of very similar questions.
We were able to bring a very diverse group of people together to speak about various topics, and I think for a long time the field was very much siloed. Having a conference like that, I think, kind of potentially speeds it up. It's almost like an accelerator for that sort of cross-pollination.
So I was on the panel that discussed the issue of constitutionality of affirmative action. The main point that I wanted to make is that the justification for affirmative action should not be diversity, which was first put out there by Justice Lewis Powell in 1978, but to be addressing the injustice of our society.
As academics, we can help change the way society digests and thinks about this. We were able to talk about how the idea of elite institutions and the choices they make is just a small segment of what higher education is, and the changes that are forced by whatever decision the Supreme Court made are going to have an effect on all 4,000 institutions of higher education and all 19 million students who are going to college.
We're coming at it from different perspectives, but there are clear places of agreement on the fact that we need to deal with the large educational gaps that we see happening in society today on the basis of race.
It's clear that democracy often doesn't serve historically disadvantaged groups well, especially when they form population minorities. How do individual beliefs affect how individuals make labor market decisions, how they make decisions within the household, and what are the economic consequences of these decisions? And these were very much themes that were explored from different angles at the conference today. And I learned a lot about the ways in which the work I do in India can be informed by many of the diversity, equity, and inclusion discussions going on, for instance, in corporate America.
Discrimination in health and law and in the environment, I think, is a very fruitful area of discussion. To do so at the University of Chicago, it's really been a pioneer, particularly in the economics of discrimination. And I'm an economic historian, and so I'm thinking about these processes as they've evolved over time. So we do a lot of work, say, today on housing market discrimination, but housing market discrimination didn't just occur in the last 5 years or 10 years. It matches to discrimination in the law, for example, restrictive covenants on homes, and then it becomes environmental when we have zoning policies, for example, that can put pollutants into certain neighborhoods and exclude them from other neighborhoods. And so all of these things are sort of interwoven in this sort of dynamic historical framework.
I'm a sociologist by training. I know quite a bit about institutions and organizations, particularly in the context of networks. Just as in outside of academia and society as a whole, the death of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement have gotten a lot more people talking about structural racism and so on than they were in the past. But the truth is, these ideas have been around for a very long time. And so what I would encourage people across all of the disciplines involved in studying discrimination to read widely across other disciplines, because just as we're seeing in the last few years, that kind of cross-disciplinary discourse can actually be very constructive for the growth of a field.
One of the overall goals of this university is to bring together people with different positions, different perspectives, different arguments about particular issues. In this program, we've seen people taking very different positions and being very open about it and learning from one another in a very University of Chicago fashion. And to that extent, I think it exemplifies what is special about this university.
One of the most important things about this conference is I think it starts creating a community.
Becker Friedman Institute, Chicago booth, and the University of Chicago more generally, because of their distinction, really has the ability that very, very few places in the world would have to really put sort of a thumb on the scale about the ways that these topics should be approached. A conference such as this that is so high profile and that is so explicitly interdisciplinary presents the opportunity to really expand what people in their respective disciplines are thinking about, given that Chicago has very publicly said that this is a productive way forward, and you'll certainly see others follow suit.